Jeff, thank you. What an honor. Hey, so since you made the smart remark about the 8th grade thing, and not going much farther, did you graduate valedictorian of your class?
Yeah, but you probably only have.
Now, did you or did you not? You did not graduate valedictorian of your class. I graduated valedictorian of my class. Anybody else graduate valedictorian? Yeah. No, it's okay. How many were in your class? Not very many. You were homeschooled? I'm just kidding. I graduated valedictorian of my class, so since he made the 8th grade comment, I had to defend myself. Of course, there were only 6 of us, so right? You're from a small town when to be in the top 10%, you got to be number 1. For those of you that don't get that, ask the lady that raised her hand, or we'll explain the math to you later. How many of you have heard me before, or this is your first time? Can I see your hands, please? Hey, that's what I'm talking about. Chris, thank you very much. Chris, thank you very much. Jeff, I appreciate what you've been doing. I can't begin to tell you what a thrill and an honor it is for me to be able to be here this morning with you. Having served on the State Fair Board in New Mexico and now being involved with the fairs in West Texas, I appreciate what you do so incredibly much. So it's a great honor for me to get to be here with you this morning, and I can't wait to get to know all of you a little more. So my question to you is, though, for some of you who I've known for the past several years, I just celebrated my 2-year wedding anniversary. Thank you. So my question to you is, how many of you in the audience are married? Can I see your hands? All right, very good. How many of you are married and wish you weren't? Can I see your hand? Yeah, for those of you, we have a saying, marriage is grand, divorce is 100 grand. Watch yourself right there. There's a couple of things that I've learned since getting married. How many of you gentlemen in the audience who are married have learned a few things since you got married and continue to be told you need to learn a few things since getting married? My wife is a saint. Obviously, if you're, being married to the motivational speaker guy, she's so lucky. I tell her all the time, I said, honey, you're so blessed to be married to a guy with the body of a god. I said, unfortunately for you, it's Buddha, but hey, whatever. So, on our first wedding anniversary, we're in the mountains, and we're about to go out to eat at a great restaurant, our favorite place. And she comes walking out of the bathroom from getting ready, and she looked like $1 million. And I said, honey, you're absolutely beautiful. I said, you're the perfect woman. In fact, if you were a heifer, I'd wish for 1,000 of you. Yeah, there was a pause, and then she looked at me and she said, oddly enough, I know that's supposed to be a compliment. I'm like, livestock judging days, babe. I mean, like, hey, you look good, right? So, and you guys get this. She comes from a family of pets. Like, they've got pets all over the place. We come from a family of, we have our pets in the field and then we eat them, right? I mean, that's how we roll. So we get married, and I'm not into the house pets. Like, that's just not who we grew up being. And she is. So we've been in this great debate. She wants to collect pets. Like, she wants the dog, the cat, the mini donkey, the mini teacup chihuahua, the Saint Bernard, and she wants them all to live with us. And I don't. So she comes in one day and she goes, honey, what if we got a fish? And I'm like, I can handle that. Like, I like fish. I like to eat fish, but I like fish. So we get a fish. It's our first pet. She's thrilled. We named the fish Scotch, so she thought I would like it better. I don't know what that means. It's Sunday morning. Forgive me. So we have this little fish, and the fish hangs out with us for about 6 weeks. And one morning, I walk into the kitchen, and our little buddy Scotch is fins up. I go back in the bedroom. I'm like, I got some really bad news for you. The fish died. My wife was emotionally distraught over the death of our first fish, the death of our first pet. And I'm like, I got to fix this. I'm the fix-it guy, right? So I said, honey, I'll take care of it. Like, you go on to work. I'll take care of the burial process. Don't worry about a thing. She says, thank you so much. So she leaves. I saw your gesture. Right? I'm about to head to the bathroom. But as I'm walking towards the bathroom, I look in the backyard, and there was this stray cat that had been coming in our backyard, and I think you're getting ahead of me. She had been feeding this stray cat, trying to, adopt it and get it to like us. And as I was walking to the bathroom, I'm like, there's a picture of a fish on the cat food bag. I thought the cat might like it. So I feed the fish to the alley cat. No big deal. My wife comes home from work. She's appreciative that I took care of things for the day. I didn't bother telling her what I did because, hey, never tell a lie, but you don't have to tell everything you know, right? So about 3 days later, I'm walking through the living room, and I hear this blood-curdling scream from the backyard. And it went a little bit about, honey, get out here. And I'm like, oh my God. So I go running to the backyard. I'm like, what? She goes, did you really try to feed our fish to the cat? I'm like, well, yeah, it's the circle of life, babe. She looks at me, she goes, obviously it didn't eat it, and I knew there's not supposed to be a little dead squid in the backyard in Levelland, Texas, USA. And I said, at this point, I probably should just say I apologize and leave, shouldn't I? She goes, you should go to the farm. I'm like, all right, I'm out. So, how many of you have learned a few things since getting married? How many of you continue to learn a few things while being married? Don't we all? Isn't that kind of how we all are? And growing up on a farm and a ranch in the middle of nowhere, I say we kind of have this warped sense of humor, don't we? We're not. How many of you are from production agriculture? Can I see your hands? How many of you know what you do every day helps people in production agriculture? Can I see your hands? That's pretty much every one of us, right? So growing up on a farm in the ranch in the middle of nowhere, I said, we lived on a ranch that was 50 miles from town, and older brother, younger sister, we're not exactly natural or normal people. You've probably already figured that out. So one of the things, though, that my dad and I have done for years is we feed out beef. If you want a half beef, we feed that out. Time out. You guys get it. We feed the whole thing out. They cut it in half, right? I don't have to explain that to you guys. So one of my customers, longtime customer, is a state representative from Roswell, New Mexico. Anybody ever heard of Roswell before? Yeah. Well, what's Roswell famous for? Yeah, I could be in New York State and people know that Roswell is famous for aliens. So I said, you know what? If you have a politician from Roswell, no jokes there. Hello. So Representative Gardner, he's heading into town, and he calls me up. He goes, hey, is my beef ready? I said, I'm sure it is. I said, meet me at McDonald's as you get into town. We'll run out to the plant and we'll pick it up. He says, okay. So we get out to the plant. Wasn't ready yet. So we go back to McDonald's. I said, no big deal. Let's just go back and chat. So we pull back up in McDonald's, and our McDonald's in Portales, New Mexico, USA is old school. Like, we had the 2 doors here, and then we had that single door down here. Remember those? For all you people that just wanted to sneak in, use the bathroom, not buy anything, and keep a clear conscience, right? So my vehicle was parked right in front of that single door. There's another car right next to that, and Gardner's car pulls right up in front of the 2 double doors. Well, we pull up and we start chatting, and we don't even get out. We're having an amazing conversation with each other. And a little bit, this elderly gentleman comes walking out of McDonald's, reaches into his pocket, and he pulls out his clicker to unlock his car. It's parked in between the 2 of us. But instead of hitting his unlock button, he hits his alarm button and his horn starts going off. Anybody ever done that before? Yeah, not next to a jackwagon like me. So, as quick as I can, I pull my clicker out of my pocket, and as soon as this old guy turns his alarm off, I turn mine on. And he looks, and he turns his on, I turn mine off, he turns his off, I turn mine on, he turns his on, I turn mine off. So, Gardner's laughing so hard, I'm finally like, shut up, dude, you're going to blow our cover. I finally let the guy turn it off, and I wait 3 seconds. And I turn it back on. He steps to throw his keys across the parking lot. I turn them off real fast. He looks down at us and goes, I don't know. And we're like, we don't know either. How many of you ever feel like people out there are pushing your buttons? Anybody come through a fair or trade show or an event and feel like people are they just showed up that day just to push your ever-loving buttons? And we've got to start being able to handle those people, don't we? I mean, quite frankly, that's pretty much what we do, isn't it? Do you ever feel like your only job is to take care of the complaints? Apparently it's a little personal for some people in the back. And it leads me to the other thing that happens out when you live in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it's Texas, right? We drive. We put miles on vehicles, do we not? I had a Ford Power Stroke pickup, had 200,000 miles on it. My brother and sister-in-law had a 2-year-old Chevrolet Tahoe that had 100,000 miles on it. They go to trade it in. They're not going to get anything for it, so my brother calls me up and he goes, hey, if you want this thing, you can have it for what they offered it to us. And I'm like, all right. It's half the miles of mine and it's red. My standards are high. So I buy this thing. Nicest vehicle I'd ever owned. I had not had this thing 2 weeks, and I'm heading to the airport in Lubbock, which is where I fly out, and I had my pickup and a 24-foot stock trailer hooked on behind it, and my 2-week-old Tahoe right next to it. My last name is Rush. I'm usually in a hurry. I go running out the back door, head to the airport. I throw my bags in the back of the Tahoe. I start backing up in the driveway. I'm looking over at the neighbor's barn to see what they're doing because, hey, that's important. As I'm backing out of the driveway, checking the neighbor's barn out, I forget that trailer's hooked on behind my pickup. I turn like I always turn and take the right front fender of my 2-week-old Tahoe and I hit the rear end of the trailer. The bracket that holds the taillight catches the right front fender and peels it like it's a tin can. The headlight falls out like it lost an eyeball. It catches the bumper, twists the bumper halfway down and off. Might have been going too fast. I get out and I look at this thing and I'm like, well, shoot. It's just me here. And me and my multiple personalities are the only ones here. I'm the only one to blame here. So I'm like, there's no way I can drive this thing to the airport. So I unhook the trailer, jump in the old pickup, head to the airport. I get back from my speech and I'm looking at this thing and I'm like, I think I actually probably bent the frame backing up. And so I'm like, there's no way that I'm going to fix this thing myself. So I got to get an estimate. So I head to town to get an estimate. About halfway to town, a buddy of mine was in the field plowing and I called him up and I'm like, Barry, when you get to the end of the row, you got to stop. You got to see how bad I tore this thing up. So he gets to the end of the row. I pull over on the side. He gets out. He comes walking over there. He looks at this thing and he goes, good grief. He goes, how fast were you going? I was like, I was backing up. He goes, looks to me like you bent the frame. I'm like, I know, right? So we go walking up to the front of this thing and we're leaning down to look under the bumper there to see if I bent the frame. And as we're doing that, about that time, a snake sticks its head up out of the bumper. We scream like schoolgirls. We go running back. I'm like, oh my gosh. I said, what are we going to do? He goes, I don't know, but I'm not touching your snake. I said, thank you very much, but what are we going to do? So I get a stick and I take this stick over there and I put the stick on the snake's head. Okay, time out. I can tell that it's a garden snake, but I don't care. It moves without legs. That's not natural. So I put the stick on the snake's head and I'm like, now what? And he said, I told you I'm not touching it. And he heads back to the tractor. And I'm like, dude, you got to help me. And ladies and gentlemen, this is where two mortal men bring their minds together and form one superpower, immortal mind. He says, I know. When you get to town, go by the car wash and take the power blaster and blast the snake out. To which I replied, yeah, that's a good idea. So I head to town. About halfway on up to town, I get to thinking to myself, you know what? I think I'll just leave it in the bumper. Yeah, no, it's going to get better. I pull up in front of the first body shop. The sign says free estimates, and I'm like, ooh, double bonus, right? So I laugh thinking this is going to be so funny. So I compose myself. I walk in the door. Much to my dismay, and from livestock judging days, the guy who was managing this place probably weighed somewhere in the neighborhood of 12 to 1,500 pounds. He had a cigarette in his mouth. He had a cigarette in his left hand. And no kidding, a third cigarette in case A or B failed him. And I thought, you know what? If he lays down to look underneath, I got to tell him. Because I personally ain't doing mouth-to-mouth on no dude, and I hate to watch a brother die. So we go outside. He looks at this thing. He goes, good grief. He goes, how fast are you going? I was like, I was backing up. He goes, looks like you probably bit the frame. I'm like, I know, right? So he starts his estimate. He never lays down to look underneath it. And I'm like, whoop, next. So at this point in time, I'm prepared to go to every body shop in New Mexico, Oklahoma, and Texas if I have to. I pull up to the next place. They're covered up with business. The manager says, sir, if you don't mind, I'll let the assistant manager start the estimate. When I'm done, I'll come out and I'll finish it up for you. I said, it's fine with me because at this point, not about the estimate. So me and the assistant manager, we go walking out of the building. He looks at this Tahoe. He goes, wow, how fast are you? I was like, I was backing up. He goes, looks like you've been. I said, I know, right? So he starts the estimate. In a little bit, the manager comes walking out of the building. He sees the thing. Both of us in unison go, he was backing up. The assistant manager had one of those silver metal clipboards, and he hands it to the manager. But as soon as his hands release from the clipboard, he looks at me and he says, so, have you looked underneath? To which I replied, nope. No, I have not. So he lays down on his back. He scoots underneath the front of that Tahoe. He's not under there 3 seconds. He comes elevating out of there, and he's leaving planet Earth with every scream of his being. He's like, wah, wah. And I'm like, what? He goes, a snake. I said, what? He goes, there's a snake in there. I said, you gotta be kidding me. He goes, dude, I looked it in the eyes. I'm like, what are we gonna do? He goes, we're gonna kill the expletive snake. And it was at that point in time I had to decide to save my head or the snake's head. And well, I'm still here. So what's the point? Do you ever feel like there's a few snakes along the way that jump out at you? Do you ever feel like there's a few snakes that know those snakes are there and don't bother to tell you? Regardless of the people who are out there pushing our buttons, regardless of the snakes along the way, we have to handle all those people that we come in contact with on a daily basis, do we not? And so my question to you today, my question to you this morning is, what do all of us in this room and a one-legged duck have in common? What's a one-legged duck do out on the water? Goes in a circle. And isn't that kind of how we are? I mean, on the farm, it's plowing, planting, cultivating, harvest, Christmas. Plowing, planting, cultivating, harvest, Christmas. And it goes about that fast, does it not? And how many of you know it's one fair board meeting to the next, and then it's Christmas, and then another fair board meeting, and the next, and then it's Christmas. And it goes about that fast, doesn't it? And from the time we're little bitty kids, what are we told time's going to do as we get older? It's going to do what? It's going to go faster. And then what happens? It goes faster. And then it's Christmas. And then it's Christmas. And then it's Christmas. So my question to you is, how can we get out of this circle that we've been operating in on a yearly basis? It's Christmas, it's Christmas. How do we get out of this circle to become even more successful than we've been in the past? And maybe I should ask the question, is it possible for us to do more? Is it possible for us to be more? Is it possible for us to have more? But what do we tend to do? We tend to get in this circle, and then it's Christmas, and then it's Christmas. And I'm here today to tell you that every one of us in this room could do more, be more, and have more than we ever thought possible. We just got to be willing to get over ourselves to get there, do we not? And I said I can sum up all leadership training in 3 words, and that's get over yourself. The day you realize it's not about you, it's about our mission, it's about what we're trying to accomplish, where we're trying to go, is the day that everything's going to change. But if we're going to get out of this circle, I believe we can do that in just 3 simple little steps. And the first one that I think we absolutely have to do is we have to be viable. So, what does the word viable even mean? I mean, you can look it up. You can call up Dr. Google. Dr. Google, one of the definitions he'll give you for viable is willing and able to grow. Like a seed. A seed, to be a viable seed, has to be willing and able to grow. And isn't that kind of how we are? Several years ago, I got the opportunity to go to Germany on an agricultural exchange program. There were 4 of us from the United States chosen to go, myself, a wheat farmer from Montana, a dairy producer from Pennsylvania, and a lady from Washington, D.C. We went to Germany and we spent 3 weeks over there. We toured different parts of their agriculture. We toured different events that they hosted throughout the country. We met with the Ministry of Agriculture for the European Union in Brussels, Belgium. We met with the Ministry of Agriculture for the country of Germany. Trip of a lifetime. We were there 24 days and I paid for 4 meals. They treated us like we were royalty, and you can tell I don't miss too many meals. Hello? The trip of a lifetime. But what happened on the trip that I've told every group associated with agriculture in any way, I've told this story because what happened on the trip at the very end of the trip resonated to my core, and I think it goes to what you do here. We were in Hamburg, up by the North Sea. Spectacularly beautiful place. It's the place where they have the thatched roofs on houses like you see in postcards and calendars. But they exist for real there. But let's be honest, at the end of 24 days, what do you just want to do? Oh, you just want to come home. And I'm a mama's boy. I was really ready to come home. And to make that even more complicated, we look on our itinerary and we see that we're going to a grain handling facility. I'm sorry. If you've been to one grain elevator, you've pretty well been to them all, right? Grain goes in, stored, grain goes out. Pretty universal process. We get how that works. We're not excited about this last stop. But we power through. Our driver picks us up at our hotel that morning, proceeds to drive us to downtown Hamburg, which would be like driving to downtown Houston. Skyscrapers everywhere. We're a little confused about what we're doing here. We pull up in front of this building. The capstone above the doors, etched in stone, is a name that matches what's on our itinerary. So we're nowhere in the right place. We go through security to get into the building that was tighter than the security at the European Union building in Brussels. So we walk down this long hallway. It's probably half the width of this ballroom. We walk down this long hallway. On the walls are pictures of barges at ports of call all over the world. We get into this conference room. It's as big as this area up here in the front. The tables were set up in a U shape. I can still tell you to this day where each one of us were seated. And a little bit, this gentleman with a suit and a tie that was poorly tied comes walking in, young guy. And I thought, yep, they just sent the Americans the intern. But then this young guy proceeded to talk about this company and how they're the second largest importer and exporter of grain in the world. Second only to Cargill, bigger than ADM. He talked about how he dealt in profits and losses of the half cent of metric tons of grain that equated to billions of dollars a year. Phenomenal conversation we had. Amazing presentation. But then he said something at the end of his presentation that so resonated with me. He said, I'm going to tell you Americans something that you don't want to hear, but you need to hear it. Okay, time out. What what do we as Americans do when a foreigner tells us something like that? Yeah, you could see our chests go up, and we're like, bring it, buddy. We won the last war in this country, we'll win the one in this room. Like, throw down. He said, I'm going to tell you something you don't want to hear, but you need to hear it. He said, I don't care what you make or do in the United States of America, because if you don't make it, Canada will. Canada doesn't make it, Mexico will. Mexico doesn't make it, South America will. South America doesn't make it, Australia will. If Australia doesn't make it, Europe will. And he said, and in 30 days, he said, 30 days, I can have anything I want anywhere in the world. In 30 days, I can have anything I want anywhere on this ball we're riding around on. So how does that impact you? Because for me, as a young punk farm boy from nowhere, I realized then and there that I'm not competing with other people in our state. I'm not just competing with those people, am I? Who am I competing against now? We're competing against the world. And as I thought about you and your association and what you people do with fairs and events, and I thought about that, and I'm like, who do you compete against? I say you compete against two people. One being this little thing called a screen. And we're entering into an era where most of these kids and most of these young people are perfectly content to sit at home, look at a device, rather than going outside and experiencing anything else. Correct? Are we competing against an unknown, unnamed, humanless, faceless device? Are you competing against that to try to get people through your door, through your gates, and to your events? Yeah, absolutely you are. But the other person that you're competing against is this person that resides somewhere in this space that lives right between your ears. And I've said it over and over and over again. The greatest enemy you'll ever face is the one between your ears. You'll do more to stop you than any other person on the planet. What you do impacts people's lives on a scale that we can't even calculate and comprehend. And yet we get so perfectly content to just sit back and do what we've always done, hoping that we get a different result, which is the definition of what? Insanity. And yet we don't want to do anything different because we don't like what? We don't like change. And the reality is the world is changing faster and faster and faster. So my question is, are you viable? As a fair, as an association, as an event, are you viable to the communities where you operate in? Yes or no? Yeah, you're doggone right you are. Are you going to have to become even more? Are you going to have to get over yourself to become even more than you've ever been in the past? Regardless of the people who are pushing our buttons, regardless of the snakes along the way, if we're going to get out of this circle to become even more viable, we're going to have to get over ourselves to get there, correct? Which leads to the second point. If we're going to get out of this circle, we've got to be valuable. So how are we valuable in this industry, in fairs and shows, and trade shows and events? How are we valuable? What do we do? I say we provide an event for people. We provide something that resonates with people in small towns all across the USA. We provide something in the big cities that impacts people on a scale that we couldn't even begin to imagine, right? But do the people that come through our gates, do they know that? Do they know our true value? When I was in high school, the first speech contest I ever won qualified me to compete at the national competition, which that year was going to be held in Orlando, Florida. I was excited. I mean, for a farm boy from one of 6 in my class, I mean, this was a big deal. Like, New Mexico going to Florida. It even made the front page of the county newspaper. Hello. I mean, giddy up. I get to Florida, I get on the shuttle bus to take us from the airport to the hotel. The only seat left was on the right side of the bus, on the inside aisle, right over there from the driver. Didn't bother me any. I had a view of Florida right out the front windshield. I quickly determined there are 2 main differences between Florida and eastern New Mexico and West Texas. They could be summed up in 2 words. That's trees and humidity. I'm glad we outlawed both at statehood. The other piece of culture shock that I had never experienced was the shuttle bus driver. I had never seen someone rap into their own airband driving down the road, and I thought to myself, you know what? We ain't in New Mexico no more. The driver finishes his little tune and he turns around to me and he goes, so man, where are you from? I proudly said, I'm from New Mexico. His eyes just about bugged out of his head. And he turns around and he says in the most sincere, inquisitive voice, he said, how'd you get across the border? Me, being the practical joker that I am, said, I swam. He said, no way. I said, that's right. Then we had to walk to the airport. He said, you're kidding me. And I nodded my head to assure him I was telling the gospel truth. He turns around and he says, do you mind if I ask you a question? I said, not at all. He said, do you people celebrate Christmas down there? I said, yep, we sure do. We even celebrate the 4th of July. Let that resonate. He said, that's amazing. We get to the hotel, I step off the bus, I turn around and I say in my best Tex-Mex accent, Buenos dias, senor. And he beams with this smile from ear to ear and sticks his hand down and says, I'd like to shake your hand to be the first to say, welcome to America. I shook his hand. He beams. To this day, I'm convinced that there's a hotel shuttle bus driver in Orlando, Florida, talking about the blonde-headed, blue-eyed, white New Mexican that rode his bus once. So what's the point? When you tell people who you are and what you do you ever have people look at you like you're from some third world country? Do you have people look at you and ask you questions like, do you celebrate Christmas? Do you ever have anybody pushing your buttons? Anybody jumping out in front of you? And what seems to be complete common sense to the rest of us, it's like a whole other world to somebody else. So are you valuable? You bring a value to our state, to our counties, to our communities like nothing else can. When I was on the State Fair Commission in New Mexico, we're at the kickoff parade. We're riding on a float, leading off the parade. Streets were lined with people. We're throwing out candy, we're having a good time. And one of my other fair commissioners, he said, you know what this just taught me? I said, that we're like manna from heaven? He said, no. He said, we're most of these people's Six Flags. Because most of these people will never get the chance to go on a big vacation. They'll never get the chance to experience Six Flags. And yet they can come to the fair. They can come to an event. They can come to something in our hometowns. And that may be the only chance they get to do something that makes an amazing memory with their who? With their family. Does that make us valuable? Yeah. Even amidst the people pushing your buttons. and the obstacles that come in our way, don't ever forget what value you bring to the lives of the humans who walk through your gates. Which leads to the third and final point if we're going to get out of this circle, and that is we have to be visible. Why? Why do we have to be visible? Because do people really understand how viable and valuable we are? Or are we just considered just the fair? Or you're one of those fair board members. Oh, you're the person behind the event. Let me complain to you. Several years ago, I was on a flight from Albuquerque, New Mexico up to Denver, Colorado. I was actually going to speak at a conference in Wyoming. You don't fly from Denver to Wyoming. They put you in a box and they throw you. If you don't know God, you'll meet Him before you get to the state line and you're going to want to be His friend. You know it's going to be a bad flight when the pilot is also the flight attendant and tells you there's a cooler in the back. We're like, hey, we got the back half, buddy. You keep the front. But what happened on the flight from Albuquerque to Denver. Now, I got to tell you, I got the worst luck of anybody on a plane. If there's a 900-pound mountain man that hasn't brushed his teeth or talked to anyone in a month, he's going to fly the day I fly, and he's going to get a middle seat, and he's going to want to chat. But on this flight, there were 2 empty seats next to me. And I'm like, giddy up, right? I mean, this is awesome. They pack us in planes like we pack cattle in trailers. I don't know who Karma is, but she gets me back every time I fly. But on this one, I'm like, hey, I'm winning this deal. But then we sit there, and we sit there, and we sit there some more. To the point we're all getting aggravated, we're all getting angry because we're going to miss connections. You can feel the tension in the plane. We've sat there so long. But then it happened. Moment I've never forgot. This lady-ish walks onto the front of the plane. She has on a black spandex unibody suit. She has on cowboy boots that come up to her knees that are so pointy they would drive a fishing nail in a baseboard. She has on a white fur coat that goes to the floor, and to top off said ensemble, she had on a purple cowboy hat she obviously bought from the carnival at the state fair. And when she walked onto the front of the plane, I thought, lady-ish, that's my gal. I'm sure she's coming to me. She apologizes to every person on every row as she gets to the middle of the plane. She looks down at me and she goes, are these 2 seats taken? And I'm like, Mama said I couldn't lie. No, they're not. She takes her fur coat off, goes to put it in the overhead bin. I feel like I've just sinned by looking at her. I'm like, there ain't no way that lady-ish and I are going to have a conversation. So I grab the magazine out of the seat back in front of me. I don't even notice that it's upside down, but I shove my face in it because I do not want to talk to that. She sits down and she starts to talk to the point that I realize that I am having a conversation with lady-ish. I put my magazine down. She says, so what do you do? I said, well, I farm and ranch and do leadership training and motivational speech. And before I could even finish, she interrupts me and she says, you're a real live farmer? I'm like, yeah, you want to pinch me? She goes, that's funny. She said, I've never met a real live farmer before. And I'm like, well, today's your lucky day. She said, do you mind if I ask you a few questions? I said, not at all. And this lady proceeds to ask me questions about an industry that my family's been involved in for 8 generations, like I've never been asked in my life. She asked me about GMOs. She asked me about organic, non-organic. She asked me about livestock handling practices. She asked me about livestock shows. She asked me about government subsidies. She asked me one question right after another, right after another. She challenged my thinking on some of these questions. She finally stops drilling me for long enough that I said, so what do you do? And she said, I'm an actress. I wanted to say, no kidding. I said, well, I've never met a real live actress before. She goes, you want to pinch me? I'm like, touche, I deserve that. I said, do you mind if I ask you a few questions? And I got to ask her all kinds of questions about acting. I've never talked to anyone that did what she does. And she's not a name that you would recognize. She's been in small roles and behind the scenes. But she told me which movies she'd been in and which scene I could find her. And she told me how many lines she'd get in a script or how many words she got in a script. And we have a phenomenal conversation. In fact, we're still talking to each other as we walk out the jet bridge into the terminal in the Denver airport. We get out in the terminal, she puts her bag down, and she starts going through her bag, and I'm like, what is she doing? And then a little bit she stands up and she says, here, I want you to have my personal business card. Because if I ever make it big in acting, I want to be your spokesperson. If I ever make it big in acting, I want to be your spokesperson. And you know the first thought that went through my head? First thought that went through my head was, shame on me. Because someone looked different than I do, and quite frankly, because someone looked different than we do, I didn't want to have a conversation with her. But because I got over myself long enough to have a conversation with her, I had someone standing up saying, I want to be your spokesperson. Do you have anyone who walks through your gates that looks different than you do? I'm just saying. If you got a low self-esteem, go to the state fair. Just saying, right? Okay. Not all bad here. I mean, hey, honey, look at me, right? But do we ever look at those people that are coming through our gates like, yeah, I don't want to have a conversation with you. And yet, what do every one of us in this room, in this association, in this industry that you're in, what do every one of us have the opportunity to do? We have the opportunity to tell a story. And in my opinion, you can tell the story of agriculture. Because at your core, that's where you began. And that's where you got your start, is it not? Is that not what we highlight and who we really are? Well, what do most people think we are? Most people think we're a carnival, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But what are we really? What are we more than that? We're a story. We're an opportunity. We are the people who have the ability and the gifting to be able to tell our story and why it matters to other people like no one else has. You have that ability. You have that gifting. You have that calling to tell a greater story than just an event. Because can you begin to imagine if we had people standing up for us saying, I want to be your spokesperson? Can you imagine what that would be like? Can you imagine if we had people in our communities, people in our state capital, people in our in the nation's capital standing up for us, defending our right to do what we do and impact tens of millions of lives, not only in this state, but all over the country? Can you imagine what that would be like? We need you to stand with us. We need you, and I do mean you and all of you and all of you and all of you and all of you over here and all of you over here and back there. We need you to stand with us and become more viable than you've ever been. Regardless of the people pushing your buttons, regardless of the snakes along the way, we need you to become more willing and able to grow than you've ever been in your history. Because you bring a value that we can't even begin to compilate. You impact people on such a personal level that gives them years of memories. That's valuable. We need you to stand and share that value with the people that come through that gate. But most importantly, we need all of you to stand with us and redefine our future and begin to do more, be more, and have more than you ever thought possible. Now just get over yourself and get out there, stand with us and make it happen. May God bless you with the most amazing year of your life. Thank you for allowing me to be here. Thank you.